Okay, welcome to Scissors and Scrubs. I'm Nicole.
I'm Laura.
And this is our quarantine episode that will be released on Memorial Day.
Yep.
And I have informed Mike I will be on strike after this until I am allowed to record in the same room with Laura. Because I do not like recording from this stupid computer where it freezes. And I can't find my jive.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. So
we're good through that into May. So.
Right. So come June, we're going to be back together.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my kid screaming in the background.
Oh, I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, no, it's my son. You would think it was my daughter, but it was my son. All right, so back on track. Okay, so this Memorial Day, we are going to cover, and I picked this topic because it does coincide with COVID.
Yes.
I'm going to cover hospital ships, which we're going to cover because they are parked at New York and LA at the moment.
Yeah.
And Laura is going to go over, what are you going over?
Vietnam nurses.
Yeah.
And kind of what their day-to-day was. And
they had it pretty bad.
Yeah.
Pretty bad.
I'm not going like wicked into detail, but it's not. They had a rough time.
They had a rough time.
Yeah.
And I think they got drafted too, didn't they?
I couldn't find it. It said like everything said volunteer.
Okay.
Like, so.
I remember reading somebody say in Boston, like, they had held a draft, but I think the women went up and, like, volunteered, but
yeah.
I can't imagine getting drafted. I think I'd crap my pants.
I know. God, that feeling must be awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go over hospital ships first, because even though I find them terribly interesting, it might be a little dry for some. I'll try to make it fun. But, it's Memorial Day, so what do you really cover? We're trying to give props to the military out there, the past, present, and future. And, so here we go.
Okay.
Hospital ships. It's possible that hospital ships existed in ancient times.
Ooh.
All of my information, Wikipedia. Are you surprised?
No.
Not at all. Okay. So the Athenian Navy, which I'm assuming is Greek, had a ship named Therapia. So it clearly is a hospital ship because it's called Therapia.
Yeah.
And the Romans had one called, Romans with their Latin names, Asculapius.
Oh.
Yeah, scapula. I don't know. That's what I'm going with. So the earliest British hospital ship is thought to be the Goodwill. This ship traveled with the Royal Navy through the Mediterranean Sea in 1608. It housed the sick sent in from other ships. So it was one big ship of bacteria and infection.
Yeah.
But within a year, the Goodwill got assigned other tasks. So she dumped all of her sick people at the nearest port and went on to what else they told her to do, which is what you do with sick people. You just dump them, get rid of them. So in the mid-17th century, the Navy started designating official Navy ships, and the ships were staffed with a surgeon and 4 surgeons' mates, which a surgeon in the 1600s basically had a saw and cut things off.
Yeah.
They had basic medical supplies like bedpans. I mean, who doesn't need a bedpan, right?
I mean, especially on a boat.
Well, I mean, you need it. Get thrown over the side. Bandages, soaps, and needles. And, I mean, the accommodations were posh. So if you were sick, you got a bed, or you got a lovely rug, a gorgeous rug, with a clean set of sheets.
On the floor of a ship.
On the floor of a ship, yeah. You got a rug. Can you imagine how clean that was?
No.
You were probably under the bed of the people who had more money. Yeah. The ships were more for sick and not wounded. Like, we have the plague. I have syphilis. We're on a ship.
Keep them away. Keep them away.
Say that again?
Say keep them away.
Yeah. Keep them away from everybody else because there was always some kind of a plague back then. So patients got triaged according to illness and quarantined according to symptoms, which mean the quarantine, basically they stuck up a canvas sheet below deck and healthy people on one side, sick people on the other.
It's like smoking a non.
Yeah, exactly. This is the peeing part of the pool. And the food was terrible.
I'm sure.
According to one surgeon, the meat was in an advanced state of putrefaction.
Oh.
The biscuits were weevil-ridden and bitter, and the bread was so hard it would tear open the roof of your mouth.
Oh my God. Weevil-ridden? Oh, I couldn't eat a biscuit for the rest of my life.
I can't.
Oh.
Putrefied meat.
No.
Sounds great.
No.
Let's give that to the sick people.
Yeah, no wonder why they were sick. Oh, God.
Eventually, the ships were used to treat the wounded. So over the years, the number of medical personnel began to increase. And by 1703, the Royal Navy ships would carry 6 landsmen to act as surgical assistants and 4 washerwomen.
Oh.
Being a washerwoman on a ship full of men, like those disgusting, dirty, filthy men.
Yeah.
Ooh, they must have made some money on the side.
Yeah.
In 1705, they added 5 nurses, also known as male nurses.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the coming years and centuries, hospital ships in the Royal Navy began to increase and become essential.
Mm-hmm.
By 1877, 1878, the British Red Cross had steel-hulled ships equipped for modern surgery equipment. Who knows what modern surgery equipment was in 1877?
A nicer saw.
It had a saw with 5 teeth instead of 3.
Yeah.
They did have anesthetics and antiseptic techniques.
Mm-hmm.
God bless.
Mm-hmm.
So now the World Wars come out and you're seeing hospital ships on a massive scale. Every country has their form of a hospital ship. I am not going down that road.
No,
I am only covering the United States because that's really the only country I give a shit about.
Yeah. Well, and Memorial Day is the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first U.S. hospital ship was the Navy's USS Relief, commissioned in 1921. They come up with very original names.
I love all the names. I love them.
Yeah, the Relief.
Mm-hmm.
So during World War One, both Army and Navy had hospital ships, but they were used for different reasons. So the Navy ships would be fully equipped hospitals, and they would receive the casualties direct from the battlefield, and they would support the frontline teams ashore. So the corpsmen are ashore, they're working on it, you would ship them to the hospital ship, and they were fully equipped to handle you.
Mm-hmm.
The Army hospitals were more like transport ships, and they were used to evacuate really sick patients to a facility away from the front line, like to a real hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So, like if you were in a MASH unit, they would get them out of the MASH unit and sail them to someplace that was better.
Okay.
They were not equipped to handle large-scale casualties.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3 naval hospital ships were the USS Comfort, the USS Hope, and the USS Mercy. They were staffed by both Army and Navy, but they were used like Army ships. So I'm going to go through those 3, and then I will talk about the ones we know today. Because originally I thought they were the same ships, but they weren't. These ships eventually get decommissioned and scrapped, and we built new hospital ships with the same names. Okay. So the USS Comfort was commissioned in May 1944, and it was transferred to the Army by May of 1946, and you will hear why.
Okay.
It operated during World War II in the South Pacific. It evacuated patients from the Philippines to Hollandia, New Guinea. And in Hollandia, New Guinea, they had set up a big major hospital for these patients to go to. Mm-hmm. They also brought patients who were really sick back to San Pedro, California. On April 29th of 1945, a Japanese suicide plane crashed through 3 decks of the USS Comfort, and it exploded in the surgery. It killed 28 people, including 6 nurses, and it wounded 48. I think it's pretty shitty because these ships have huge red crosses on them. You know they're hospital ships. You went out of your way to go after the sick and wounded. That's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
Okay. So it arrived in L.A. on May 20th, 1945, and it was decommissioned in 1946. I'm assuming because of the damage. It was given to the Army. In 1953, it went to the Maine Maritime Academy and was used as a training ship. Okay, so the USNS Comfort we see today was launched in 1975, and it's stationed in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
It has 1,000-bed capacity and a flight deck that can hold military helicopters. Okay. It's to support the Marines and Army. Mm-hmm. It's more advanced than a field hospital, but less capable than a land hospital. And it's staffed with 956 naval hospital staff, 258 naval support staff, and 63 civilians are on board.
Wow.
It has an 80-bed ICU, a 20-bed PACU, a 280 intermediate care ward, a 120-bed light care ward, and a 500-bed limited care ward, and 12 operating rooms.
Wow.
So it is equipped with labs, x-rays, central supply, PT, burn care, dental services. It has 4 distilling plants to make seawater drinkable.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was activated in 1990 and 91 for the Persian Gulf.
Huh?
It was activated in 94 to serve as a migrant processing center for the Haitian immigrants. It was also, I don't know what was going on in Haiti at this time, and I'd like to look it up because it was also there to support Allied forces going ashore in Haiti. They thought they were going to have a lot of casualties, so that's why it was down there. It showed up in New York during 9/11. It was sent over for the Iraq War during 2002 and 2003. 2000, kid.
Yeah, that was nice.
It was deployed in 2005 for Katrina. It was deployed in 2010 for other hurricane relief. You know what? I know what I did. Okay. 2017, it supported Hurricane Maria. In 2018, it was Operation Enduring Promise. And it is currently stationed in New York Harbor, supporting for the COVID crisis. Okay. Now we move on to ship number 2. This is what I did. I covered each ship completely before I went on to the next one.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I didn't think I did that. Okay. So we have the USS Hope that launched in August 30th of 1943. And the Hope, like the Comfort, was in the Philippines to assist wounded to the hospitals in Hollandia. On 12/3/1944, she was unsuccessfully attacked by a Japanese torpedo. And 3 days later, it was attacked again by a bomb that was dropped on top. And it must not have gone off because there was no damage.
God.
But again, second ship attack.
Yeah.
It served throughout World War II with no other issues. And it was decommissioned in 1946. And it was sold for scrap in 1978. It does not have a current ship named after it.
Okay. That was the Hope.
That was the Hope. And now we have the USS Mercy, which was launched on the 25th of March, 1943. It too served in the South Pacific to aid in the war in the Pacific. The Mercy completed 7 voyages of evacuating wounded throughout the war. So you figure in these years, it was going back and forth. 3 ships were going back and forth, taking wounded out of the Philippines and the whole Southern Pacific theater. So she was decommissioned in 1946 and sold for scraps in 1970. So then the ships were called USS, now they're USNS. So the difference between USS and USNS, we had to look up. The United States ship is allowed to carry weapons. The military ships today, the hospital ships, the United States naval ships are not allowed to carry weapons. They are not prepared for combat. So she completed 7 voyages. She sold for scraps. So the today's Mercy does not carry any weapons, and it is a war crime to attack her. She was launched in 1975, and her home port is in San Diego, California. The Mercy is also a 1,000-bed hospital, and in full operating status, it holds a crew of 1,214. You like that? 12,000 is a big ship. That's a big-ass ship. Correction, 1,214 military personnel and 61 civilians. The Mercy's goal is the same as the Comfort in supporting the Marines and the Army during battle. So I think people don't realize a lot of times your front lines of Iraq and all those, it's the Marines and the Army. The Navy usually is support, the Air Force support. Navy people everywhere are probably going to punch me in the face, but you're giving more support. Usually your medical support, your air support, or whatever that. The Marines are the grunts, the Armies are the grunts. They're going in, facing the battle. So those are the guys I think that's why they might staff it with both Army and Navy as well. So, what ship am I talking about? The Mercy? The Mercy. Mercy. In 1990 and 91, it too was deployed for Operation Desert Shield, which I actually remember in high school seeing these ships go out. They were like, oh my God, they pulled out the hospital ships. It's going to be bad. In 2004, it helped the tsunami victims in Southeast Asia. 2008, 2010, 2012, it does this Pacific Partnership humanitarian missions. It goes through the South Pacific. I don't know what it does, but
that's what treat people on board, Like
they go on board, and they may even help, but I think it's more of like a goodwill mission. So in 2013, it helped in the Philippines after Typhoon Haiyan. That's what it's, so Haiyan, Haiyan. That's what it is. Back in 2015, 16, and 2018, again, Pacific Partnership. Currently, it is stationed in LA to help with its COVID crisis. It carries the same stats as the USS, what was the other one I called it?
Comfort.
The Comfort, right, because the Hope is the one that nobody's renamed after.
That's not it.
It has the same amount of operating rooms and beds and cares and units and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So I was going to go into the specifics of like war crimes against these ships, what you can and cannot do, but I thought it would be too boring, so I skipped it. I probably could have covered it. But I find the ships really interesting, and they're huge. And the fact that they had all, like, they basically little floating hospitals that have all the same support that a regular hospital has. I thought that was pretty cool.
I mean, that's bigger than, like,
most
community hospitals. You know, like, that's a bigger hospital. That's insane to me that they have all that stuff on there.
Yeah. Full labs, everything. X-ray, like, everything's on. And I love that they have, like, you can take the seawater, the distilling units. You take the seawater and you make regular water.
Right.
I think every ship everywhere should have that, because my biggest fear is I'm not going to have water to drink.
I know.
Okay. Take it over, Sparkle.
Oh, all right. So, well, now it's dark out. Hold on, I gotta put a light on.
I know. It's...
So I went over Vietnam nurses, and I got a lot of this information from Texas Tech University. So young women from all over the country, and like this isn't the only website I checked, but they all said volunteered, because I had heard there was a draft. They all said volunteered. Right. So young women from all over the country volunteered to serve their country in hospitals in South Vietnam. They volunteered to serve their country for some of them for an adventure, like, this is different. Let me go to Vietnam. You know, like,
I'm gonna see things.
Go to the jungle. I'll see something different. To further their military careers, to receive training and education, to help the servicemen, or just to prove to themselves, like, hey, I can do this.
Right.
They served on military ships for the Navy, airlift helicopters and planes for the Air Force, and the field hospitals for the Army. They were brand new nurses, and then they were nurses that had been nurses for 30 years. It ranged all over the place, but a lot. Wasn't
it last Memorial Day you talked about that? Was it Ruby?
Yeah.
Who had been in World War II.
Yeah, she was in all
Korea, and she was still, like, kicking ass in Vietnam. Like, mother of Christ.
I think she left right before Vietnam.
All right.
They were not. So they had, like, you know, seasoned nurses, and then they had brand new nurses going into this terrible
That's a way to get experience.
Situation. Yeah. And they sasaid, which is, I would assume would happen anyways. They said the newer nurses, like, had a lot of PTSD after.
Oh, I bet.
Because I mean, you don't see anything, and then you see that.
You go in the pits of hell.
Yeah. Since Vietnam was the first major conflict to use the helicopter to transport wounded soldiers to hospitals, Vietnam nurses saw patients more severely wounded than ever before. Sometimes a soldier would be in a hospital being treated 30 minutes after being wounded.
Woof.
Yeah. Medevac, which is the helicopters that fly them out, saved thousands of lives. Because,
we should cover that next Memorial Day, the medevac.
Yeah, because they were saying, like, this is literally the first time they ever used this. So most of these guys that these helicopters saved would have died. The nurses never would have seen them in their injuries, in their, you know, the state they were in.
And just even the stories of the pilots.
Oh, I'm sure.
What they went through to make sure that these guys got out.
Oh, yeah.
Like, shot at, or I went anyway when they told me not to. Like, we should cover them next year.
Yeah, so these nurses were seeing things that nurses and doctors had not been seeing in previous wars. And because of this, nurses had to make really fast decisions as to who would be treated and with what treatments. Mm-hmm. Their practice was very autonomous, and that was really different than nursing back in the States.
Yeah,
especially back then. It is. I mean, a lot of practices now have autonomy, but back then, especially, was like the doctor said, "This is what you do." Like, you didn't step outside of what they told you to do. And there, they kind of not ran the show, but they had autonomy. Like, okay, that guy's not going to make it. I have to move to this guy, or I'm going to treat this guy because I think he can make. You know, like
right.
And they decided the treatments, so they had a lot of say. Yeah. Vietnam combat nurses worked 6 to 12 hour shifts. No, I'm sorry, 6 12-hour shifts a week.
Oh.
Yeah, I worked 3 and I could cry.
You're kidding.
No. If there was a big battle or a mass casualty event, they had to work way longer than that. They were working all day, all night, all day, all night. You didn't leave. They volunteered in the communities where they were staying. They went to visit orphanages.
I never knew that.
Yep. They went to the local hospitals to give out supplies, to perform medical services. They taught classes on hygiene, first aid, English. Like, they didn't just work 6 12-hour shifts a week.
So there was no break for them.
They then went out and volunteered in the Vietnam communities.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I would have been sleeping. You know
Right.
that.
No, I'm
sleeping.
sure there's a couple, but they, like they say, they did all these things in the community for these people. And even though they faced a huge amount of stress from the injuries that they were seeing, from the amount of wounded men, and I can't undo this page. And, they had the stress of not being able to save them all.
Mm-hmm.
Most found their service very rewarding. They were proud that they did it. They were happy they did it. And 98% of soldiers who made it to the hospitals survived.
Wow.
98%. Yeah. And,
wow.
And the ones that made it were ones that would never have made it before the medevac. So this was like unprecedented. This experience obviously bonded these nurses together. Whenever you do trauma or there's something traumatic, you're obviously bonded with those people, for the rest of your life.
We don't see a fraction of that. Not even a little bit. And we're all bonded at work because all the shit we see.
Right. When you're in a stress-filled
yes.
situation, you form a bond. About 6,000 women served as nurses during Vietnam. 7 Army nurses and 1 Air Force nurse died. That's it. And those 8 are on the Vietnam War Memorial in D.C.
Are they the only women on that memorial?
I believe so. Yeah, 8 women.
Wow.
And it's just the nurses. And other women did die, like civilians and, other, I think there was like 50 women that died. But their names aren't on it.
Okay.
And I'll get into it. So I'm just going to go over the 8 women. Like, it's like a little quick synopsis on each. So there was First Lieutenant Sharon Ann Lane. She's from Canton, Ohio. She was a U.S. Army nurse. She was killed by a rocket blast on June 8th, 1969, less than 10 weeks after arriving in Vietnam.
Oh.
Yeah. She was working at the 312th Evacuation Hospital on the Vietnam ward. So she was working with Vietnamese patients. And the rocket came in through that ward and exploded and killed her and the patients.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. And then there's Second Lieutenant Pamela Dorothy Donovan. She's from Brighton, Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah. Brighton. Dorothy Donovan.
Mm-hmm. She was a U.S. Army nurse. She was originally from Ireland, moved here, and joined the Army.
As most nurses in Boston were.
I know.
At the time.
Yep. She unfortunately died of a rare Southeast Asian virus on July 8th, 1968.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, she caught some rare virus over there and died from it.
Probably COVID.
I know. She worked at the 85th Evacuation Hospital in, I'm never going to say these names, Queenon.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Yeah. Then there's Lieutenant Colonel Annie Ruth Graham. She's from Efland, North Carolina. She was a U.S. Army nurse, and she suffered a stroke on August 14th, 1968.
How old was she?
Well, it didn't say how old she was, but the picture of her, she's not old, but she was definitely older.
She's stroke material?
She's a seasoned nurse. She was the chief nurse with the 91st Evacuation Hospital in Tu Ho.
Yeah, that's good. Whatever.
Yeah. So she just happened to have a stroke while she was over there.
Oh, that's tough.
Sure, the stress did not help.
Oh, yeah.
Captain Mary Therese Clinker was from Lafayette, Indiana. She was a U.S. Air Force nurse. She was part of the onboard medical team during Operation Baby Lift. Her flight was carrying 243 infants and children.
Ooh, this doesn't sound...
No. There were pressure problems in the cabin. The plane crashed. And she died on April 4th, 1975. 3 weeks before the fall of Saigon.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Second Lieutenant Carol Ann Elizabeth Drasba was from Dunmore, Pennsylvania. She was also a U.S. Army nurse, and she was killed in a helicopter crash near Saigon on February 18th, 1966. Second Lieutenant Elizabeth Ann Jones from Allendale, South Carolina, was a U.S. Army nurse killed in the same helicopter crash as Second Lieutenant Drasba. She had been assigned to the 3rd Field Hospital. Captain Eleanor Grace Alexander from Rivervale, New Jersey, was also a U.S. Army nurse. She had been working in a hospital in Pleiku, it's Pleiku, to help during a mass casualty event. So they would move them around, like, oh, they are having a mass casualty, we'll take some staff. On her return trip to Queenon on November 30th, 1967, her plane crashed.
Oh.
She was assigned to the 85th Evacuation Hospital. First Lieutenant Hedwig Diane Orlowski was from Detroit, Michigan. She was also a U.S. Army nurse. She was on the same plane as Captain Alexander and died on November 30th, 1967. She was assigned to the 67th Evacuation Hospital. So they just, they would take these women and move them to where, they obviously needed more help. And then they both died on the way back.
Oh, imagine dying on the way back. Jeez.
And like the other woman, the poor woman who died 3 weeks before the fall of cyclone. Like, you're like, it's almost there. It's just so sad. Yeah. All of them are awful. Over 265,000 women served during the Vietnam era. About 11,000 served in Southeast Asia. Almost 90% of the 11,000 were nurses.
Mm-hmm.
But some women served as civilians in the Red Cross and the USO. More than 50 civilian American women died in Vietnam. Others served as doctors, air traffic controllers, intelligence officers, clerks, and other roles. In November 1993, the Vietnam Women's Memorial was dedicated in honor of all those women. It's a statue of 3 women tending to 1 soldier. And that was the first national memorial to women veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And that there was like an article about when they, dedicated the monument, and they were saying like I don't remember the woman's name. You were standing there. Nicole was standing there, and I came in and I was like, Nicole, it's me. It's Laura. And they just like were hysterical, crying and hugging, and they said, the stuff we saw, you don't forget who was standing next to you. It was just so it was sweet.
Moving, yeah. That's very.
And then one man was there, and he said this memorial needs to be right next to this wall because it's a little further out. Than the wall. It's not like right next to it. And he said these women were there. These women were the last people that these men saw most of the time.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry.
So this should be right next to it because they were there for them. And I was like, that was really sweet, but
yeah.
So that's just a little tidbit on the Vietnam nurses.
All right, let me ask you this:
mm-hmm.
Would you be Navy or Army nurse?
I'm gonna have to say Navy.
Yeah, I think I would too.
I like the Dickies.
Marines so much.
Just because what?
I like the Marines so much.
I know. I like so the little fun. Dickies they walk around.
I just love them. I think they're so cute. I don't know. I think I feel a little safer on the ship, back a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to be back
on the front line in a mobile hospital unit.
I mean, obviously those ships get bombed and stuff, but
well, yeah, but still, take my chances.
Yeah, I'd like the ship better. I think. I don't know. It's all scary.
I give those women credit.
Yeah.
And they were all going to war. Vietnam was a tough time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all going to war when it was the most frowned upon thing to be doing at the time, and they were seeing horrific things that women at that time just didn't see.
No, and even today, I mean, you don't see, most people will never see that, thank God.
But women were so shielded.
Yes.
You're talking the 60s, early 70s. Women were still so shielded. I mean, you're talking that's the time women would still stand when the surgeon walked in the room. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, it was just, they were still wearing the white dresses and the hats and the shoes. Right. They were just so shielded. And these women were seeing, they were front lines of these battles. And those were some bad battles. Yeah. I still think of all the wars. That was a bad one. Yeah. That was probably the worst,
Yeah.
The burns they must have seen. Ooh.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. So happy Memorial Day.
I know. Thank you.
It was a short episode, but it's hard to cover these because there's a lot to cover, and then we're not really sure what to cover. It's kind of all over the place.
I know.
So hopefully, by the time this comes out, we're on tier 1 or 2, and we're able to actually leave the homes and maybe go to a barbecue or something with 3 other people.
Mm-hmm.
So enjoy your Memorial Day. Be safe.
Yes.
And we're going to be looking at a new normal after this whole COVID thing. So hopefully the summer will still be as much fun. Sure. We got some fun things coming up in June. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Like, subscribe, rate, and review the Scissors and Scrubs podcast on whatever podcast app you listen to us on. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Scissors and Scrubs. And email us any of your stories or thoughts to scissorsnscrubs@gmail.com.